My dear Parikshit, that Lord Balarama killed Dhenukasura is not such a wonderful thing, considering that he is the unlimited personality of Godhead, the controller of the entire universe. Indeed, the entire cosmos rests upon him just as a woven cloth rests upon its own horizontal and vertical thread. Purport. Unfortunate persons cannot appreciate the blissful pastimes of the Supreme Lord. In this connection, Srila Jiva Goswami explains that the Supreme Lord possesses unlimited potency and strength, as expressed here by the word Anante. The Lord exhibits a tiny fraction of his power according to the need of a particular situation. Lord Balarama desired to vanquish the gang of demoniac asses who had unlawfully seized the Talavana forest, and therefore he exhibited just enough divine opulence to easily kill Dhenukasura and the other demons. I need
Drink.
I need to
drink, Maharaj?
No. No, that's what I want.
Oh, fresh.
Text 36. The other ass demons, close friends of Dhenukasura, were enraged upon seeing his death, and thus they all immediately ran to attack Krishna and Balarama. Well, purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Sanatana Goswami makes the following comment on this verse. It is stated here that the ass demons first attacked Krishna and then Balarama. Krishnam cha Raman cha. One reason for this is that the demons, having seen the prowess of Lord Balarama, thought it wise to attack Krishna first. Or it may be that out of affection for his elder brother, Lord Krishna placed himself between Balarama and the ass demons. The words Krishnam cha Raman cha may also be understood to indicate that Lord Balarama, out of affection for his younger brother, went to Lord Krishna's side. Text 37. O king, as the demons attacked Krishna and Balarama, easily seized them one after another by their hind legs and threw them all into the tops of the palm trees. Wow. Text 38. The earth then appeared beautifully covered with heaps of fruits with the dead bodies of the demons, which were entangled in the broken tops of the palm trees. Indeed, the earth shone like the sky decorated with clouds. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura, the bodies of the demons were dark, like dark blue clouds, and the large quantity of blood that had flowed from their bodies appeared like bright red clouds. Thus, the whole scene was very beautiful. Wow. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, in its various forms, such as Rama and Krishna, is always transcendental. And when he enacts his transcendental pastimes, the result is always beautiful and transcendental. Even when the Lord performs violent acts like killing the stubborn ass demons. Interesting. Text 39. Hearing of this magnificent feat of the two brothers, the demigods and other elevated living beings rained down flowers and offered music and prayers in glorification. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Sanatana Goswami comments that the demigods, great sages, and other exalted beings were all astonished and ecstatic upon seeing the unusually swift and nonchalant way in which Krishna and Balarama killed the very powerful ass demons in the Kala forest. Text number 40. People now felt free to return to the forest where Danica had been killed, and without fear they ate the fruits of the palm trees. Also, the cows could now graze freely upon the grass there. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the Acharya, low-class people such as the Pulindas ate the fruits of the palm trees, but Krishna's cowherd boyfriends considered them undesirable since they had been since they had been tainted with the blood of the asses. Text 41. Then lotus-eyed Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories are most pious to hear and chant, returned home to Vraja with his elder brother Balarama. Along the way, the cowherd boys, his faithful followers, chanted his glories. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When the glories of Sri Krishna are vibrated, both the speakers and the hearers are purified and become pious. Text 42. Lord Krishna's hair, powdered with the dust raised by the cows, was decorated with a peacock feather and forest flowers. The Lord glanced charmingly and smiled beautifully, playing upon his flute while his companions chanted his glory. The gopis all together came forward to meet him, their eyes very eager to see him. Purports by Srila Prabhupada. Superficially, the gopis were young married girls, and therefore they would naturally be ashamed and fearful of casting loving glances at a beautiful young boy like Sri Krishna. But Sri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all living beings are his eternal servants. Thus the gopis, although the most pure-hearted of all great souls, did not hesitate to come forward and satisfy their love-struck eyes by drinking in the sight of the beautiful young Krishna. The gopis also relished the sweet sound of his flute and the enchanting fragrance of his body. Harivilas. Text 43. With their bee-like eyes, the women of Vrindavana drank the honey of the beautiful face of Lord Mukunda, and thus they gave up the distress they had felt during the day because of separation from him. The young Vrindavana ladies cast sidelong glances at the Lord, glances filled with bashfulness, laughter, and submission. And Sri Krishna completely accepted these glances as a proper offering of respect. Entered the cowherd village. Purport. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada describes this incident as follows. All the gopis in Vrindavana remained very morose on account of Krishna's absence. All day they were thinking of Krishna in the forest, or of him herding cows in the pasture. When they saw Krishna's returning, all their anxieties were immediately relieved, and they began to look at his face, the way drones hover over the honey of the lotus flower. When Krishna entered the village, the young gopis smiled and laughed. Krishna, while playing the flute, enjoyed the beautiful smiling faces of the gopis. The Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, is the supreme master of romantic skills, and thus he expertly engaged loving feelings with the young cowherd girls of Vrindavan. When a chaste young girl is in love, she glances at her beloved with shyness, jubilation, and submission. When the beloved accepts her offering of love by receiving her glance and is thus satisfied with her, the love, the loving young girl's heart, young girl's heart become filled with happiness. These were exactly the romantic exchanges taking place between beautiful young Krishna and the loving cowherd girls of Vrindavana. Text 44. Mother Yasoda and Mother Rohini, acting most affectionately toward their two sons, offered all the best things to them in response to their every desire and at the various appropriate times. The word Paramasisa indicates the attractive blessings of a loving mother, which include wonderful food, beautiful clothes, jewelry, toys, and constant affection. The words yata kaman yata kalon indicate that although Yasoda and Rohini satisfied all the desires of their sons, Krishna and Balarama, they also properly regulated the boys' activities. In other words, they prepared wonderful food for their children, but they saw to it that the boys ate at the proper time. Similarly, their children would play at the proper time and sleep at the proper time. The word yata kaman does not indicate that the mothers indiscriminately allowed the boys to do whatever they liked, but in the proper civilized way, they showered their blessings upon their children. Srila Sanatana, their son, so much that as they embraced them, they would carefully check all their limbs to see if they were healthy and strong. Text 45. By being bathed and massaged, the two young lords were relieved of the weariness caused by walking on the country roads. Then they were dressed in attractive robes and decorated with transcendental garlands and fragrances. Text 46. After dining sumptuously on the delicious food given them by their mothers, and being pampered in various ways, the two boys lay down upon their excellent beds and happily went to sleep in the village of Raja. Text 47. O king, the Supreme Lord Krishna thus wandered about the Vrindavana area, performing his pastimes. Once, surrounded by his boyhood friends, he went without Balarama to the Yamuna River. Text 48. At that time, the cows and cowherd boys were feeling acute distress from the glaring summer sun. Afflicted by thirst, they drank the water of the Yamuna River, but it had been contaminated with poison. Oh, that means some demon has washed, has come into the place.
Hmm.
As soon as they touched the poisoned water, all the cows and boys lost their consciousness by divine power of the Lord and fell lifeless at the water's edge. O hero of the Kulas, seeing them in such a condition, Lord Krishna, the master of all masters of mystic potency, felt compassion for these devotees who had no Lord other than him. Thus he immediately brought them back to life by showering his nectarian glance upon them. Wow, you can see how powerful the glance of Krishna is. Text 51. Regaining their full consciousness, the cows and boys stood up out of the water and began to look at one another in great astonishment. Text 52. O king, the cowherd boys then considered that although they had drunk poison, and in fact they had died, simply by the merciful glance of Govinda, they had regained their lives and stood up by their own strength. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of the divine grace, of his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 15th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Killing of Denuka and the Ass Demon. Chapter 16. Krishna chastises the serpent Kaliya. This chapter describes Lord Shri Krishna's pastimes of subduing the serpent Kaliya within the lake adjoining the river Yamuna, and his showing mercy to Kaliya in response to the prayers offered by Kaliya's wives, the Nagapatnis, to restore the purity of the Yamuna's waters, which had been contaminated by Kaliya's poison. Lord Krishna climbed into a kadamba tree on the riverbank and jumped into the water. Then he began fearlessly playing with the water like a maddened elephant. Kaliya could not tolerate Krishna's trespassing upon his personal residence, and the serpent quickly went up to the Lord and bit him on the chest. Oh my God. When Krishna's friends saw this, they fell down on the ground unconscious. At that time, all sorts of evil omens appeared in Braja, such as earth tremors, falling stars, and the trembling of various creatures' left limbs. The residents of Vrindavana thought, today Krishna went to the forest without Balarama, so we do not know what great misfortune may have befallen him. Thinking in this way, they traced the path of Krishna's footprints to the bank of the Yamuna. Within the water of the lake adjoining the river, they saw Lord Krishna, the very essence of their lives, enwrapped in the coils of a black snake. Oh my God. The residents thought the three worlds had become empty, and they all prepared to enter the water. But Lord Balarama checked them, knowing well the power of Krishna. Then Lord Krishna, seeing how disturbed his friends and relatives had become, expanded his body greatly and forced the serpent to loosen his grip and release him. Next, the Lord began playfully dancing about on the serpent's hoods. By this wonderful, boisterous dancing, Sri Krishna trampled the serpent's 1,000 hoods until his body slackened, vomiting blood from his mouth. Kalia finally understood that Krishna was the primeval personality, Lord Narayana, the supreme master of all moving and non-moving creatures, and he took shelter of him. Seeing how very weary Kalia had become, his wives and Nagapatnis bowed them down at Lord Krishna's lotus feet. Then they offered him various prayers in hopes of gaining their husband's freedom. It is quite fitting that you have brought our cruel husband to this condition. Indeed, by your anger, he has gained great benefit. What piety Kalia must have amassed in his previous lives. Today he is born upon his head the dust of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, the attainment of which is difficult for even the mother of the universe, Goddess Lakshmi. Please kindly forgive the offense Kalia has committed out of ignorance and allow him to live. Satisfied by Nagapatni's prayer, Krishna released Kalia, who slowly regained his sensory and vital powers. Then Kalia, in a distressed voice, acknowledged the offense he had committed, and finally he offered Krishna many prayers and said he was ready to accept his command. Krishna told him to leave the Yamuna lake with his family and return to Ramanaka Island. Ramanaka Island. I wonder where that is. Text number 1. Sukadeva Goswami said, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, seeing that the Yamuna River had been contaminated by the black snake Kalia, desired to purify the water, and thus the Lord banished him from it. Text 2. King Parikshit inquired, O learned sage, please explain how the Supreme Personality of Godhead chastised the serpent Kalia within the unfathomable waters of the Yamuna, and how it was that Kalia had been living there for so many ages. Text 3. O Brahman, the unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead freely acts according to his own desires. Who could be satiated when hearing the nectar of the magnanimous pastimes he performed as a cowherd boy in Vrindavana? Text number 4. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, within the river Kalindi, Yamuna, was a lake inhabited by the serpent Kalia, whose fiery poison constantly heated the boiled its waters. Indeed, the vapors thus created were so poisonous that birds flying over the contaminated lake would fall down into it. Wow, that was really contaminated. Purport. In this regard, the Acharyas explained that the Kalia lake was situated apart from the main current of the river. Otherwise, the Yamuna's waters would have been poisonous, even in cities like Mathura and other places farther away. The wind blowing over the deadly lake carried droplets of water to the shore. Simply by coming in contact with that poisonous breeze, all vegetation and creatures on the shore died. Purport. The word stira, unmoving creatures, refers to various types of vegetation, including trees, and jangama offers to moving creatures such as animals, reptiles, birds, and insects. Srila Sridhara Swami has quoted a further description of this lake from the Sri Harivilas, Vishnu Parva 11.42, 11.44, and 11.46. The lake was quite wide, 8 miles across at some points, and even the demigods could not cross over it. The water in the lake was very deep and, like the immovable depths of the ocean, could not be agitated. Approaching the lake was difficult, for its shores were covered with holes in which serpents lived. Wow, dangerous. All around the lake was a fog generated by the fire of the serpent's poison. And this powerful fire would at once burn up every blade of grass that happened to fall into the water. For a distance of 8 miles from the lake, the atmosphere was most unpleasant. Srila Sanatana Goswami states that by the mystical science of Jala Stamba, making solid items out of water, Kaliya built Kalia had built its own city within the lake. Wow, that's a miracle. It's a mystical science of Jala Samba, making solid items out of water. Interesting. Text 6. Lord Krishna saw how the Kaliya serpent had polluted the Yamuna River with his terribly powerful poison. Since Krishna had descended from the spiritual world, specifically to subdue envious demons, the Lord immediately climbed to the top of a very high kadamba tree and prepared himself for battle. He tightened his belt, slapped his arms, and then jumped into the poisonous water. Oh my God. Oh, okay. Lord Krishna is in a very precarious situation here. Purport. According to the Acharya, Lord Krishna also tied back the locks of his hair as he prepared to do battle with Kaliya. Text 7. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead landed in the serpent's lake, the snakes there became extremely agitated and began breathing heavily, further polluting it with volumes of poison. The force of the Lord's entrance into the lake caused it to overflow on all sides, and poisonous, fearsome waves flooded the surrounding lands up to a distance of 100 bow lengths. This is not at all amazing. However, for the Supreme Lord possesses infinite strength. Text 8. Krishna began sporting in Kaliya's lake like a lordly elephant, swirling his mighty arms and making the water resound in various ways. When Kaliya heard these sounds, he understood that someone was trespassing in his lake. The serpent could not tolerate this and immediately came forward. Well, I think I think the demon is going to get his and get himself in big trouble. Purport. According to the Acharyas, Lord Krishna was producing wonderful musical sounds within the water simply by splashing his hands and arms. Wonderful. Text 9. Kaliya saw that Sri Krishna, who wore yellow silken garments, was very delicate, his attractive body shining like a glowing white cloud, his chest bearing the mark of Srivatsa, his face smiling beautifully, and his feet resembling the whorl of a lotus flower. The Lord was playing fearlessly in the water. Despite his wonderful appearance, the envious Kaliya furiously bit him on the chest and then completely enwrapped him in his coils. Whoa, that's very, very dangerous and bad. Text 10. When the members of the cowherd community who had accepted Krishna as their dearest friend saw him enveloped in that snake's coils, motionless, they were greatly disturbed. They had offered Krishna everything, their very selves, their families, their wealth, wives, and all pleasure. At the sight of the Lord in the clutches of the Kaliya snake, their intelligence became deranged by grief, lamentation, and fear, and thus they fell to the ground. Poor, really loved Krishna. Purport. Srila Sanatana Goswami explains that the cowherd boys, along with some cowherd men and farmers who happened to be in the vicinity and who were also devotees of Krishna, fell to the ground just like trees that had been cut at the roots. Text 11. The cows, bulls, and female calves, in great distress, called out piteously to Krishna. Fixing their eyes on him, they stood still in fear, as if ready to cry, but too shocked to shed tears. Oh boy, that's horrible. Text 12. In the Vrindavana area, there then arose all three types of fearful omens, those on the earth, those in the sky, and those in the bodies of living creatures, which announced imminent danger. Purport. According to Srila Sridhara Swami, the omens were as follows. On the earth, there were disturbing tremors. In the sky, there were meteors falling. And in the bodies of the creatures, there was shivering, as well as quivering of the left eye and other parts of the body. These omens announced imminent danger. Yeah, especially uh, the quivering of the left eye and other parts of the body. These omens announce imminent danger. Text 13 to 15. Seeing the inauspicious omens, Nanda Maharaja and other cowherd men were fearful, for they knew that Krishna had gone to herd the cows that day without his elder brother Balarama, because they had dedicated their minds to Krishna, accepting him as their very life. They were unaware of his great power and opulence. Thus they concluded that the inauspicious omens indicated he had met with death. Now, come on, Krishna is too great for that. And they were overwhelmed with grief, lamentation, and fear. All the inhabitants of Vrindavana, including the children, women, and elderly persons, thought of Krishna just as a cow thinks of her helpless young calf. And thus, these poor suffering people rushed out of the village intent upon finding him meaning Krishna. Text 16. The Supreme Lord Balarama, the master of all transcendental knowledge, smiled and said nothing when he saw the residents of Vrindavan in such distress, since he understood the extraordinary power of his younger brother. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Shri Balarama is the plenary expansion of Lord Krishna and is thus non-different from him. They are, in fact, the same absolute truth manifest in separate forms. According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, Lord Balarama was laughing because he thought, Krishna never cares to play with me in my form of Seshanada, but now he is playing with this ordinary mundane snake named Kaliya. The question may arise as to why Krishna and Balarama allowed their loving devotees to suffer such great anguish during Krishna's temporary imprisonment within the coils of Kaliya. It must be remembered that because the inhabitants of Vrindavan were completely liberated souls, they did not experience material emotions. When they saw their beloved Krishna in apparent danger, their love for him intensified to the highest degree, and thus they merged completely into the ecstasy of love for him. The whole situation has to be seen from the spiritual point of view, or it will not be seen at all. Okay, and now we're seeing this from the spiritual point of view. Text 17. The residents hurried toward the banks of the Yamuna in search of the dearest Krishna, following the path marked by his footprints, which bore the unique signs of the personality of Godhead. Text 18. The footprints of Lord Krishna, the master of the entire cowherd community, were marked with the lotus flower, barley corn, elephant goad, thunderbolt, and flag. My dear King Parikshit, seeing his footprints on the path among the cows' hoofprints, the residents of Vrindavan rushed along in great haste. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Sanatana Goswami comments as follows. Since Lord Krishna had passed along the path sometime previously, why weren't his footprints, which were surrounded by those of cows, cowherd boys, and so on, smuggled over and brushed away? Why hadn't his footprints been obliterated by those of the beasts and birds of Vrindavana forest? The answer is indicated by the word Vishpati, master of the cowherd community. Since Lord Krishna is actually the wealth of all living beings, all the inhabitants of the forest of Raja would carefully preserve his footprints as great treasures, the very ornaments of the earth. Thus, no creature within Vrindavan would ever walk upon Lord Krishna's footprints. Text 19. As they hurried along the path to the bank of the Yamuna River, they saw from a distance that Krishna was in the lake, motionless within the coils of the black serpent. They further saw that the cowherd boys had fallen unconscious, and that the animals were standing on all sides, crying out for Krishna. Seeing all this, the residents of Vrindavan were overwhelmed with anguish and confusion to see how much they loved Krishna. Purport: in their grief and panic, the residents of Vrindavan tried to find out whether Kalia had forcibly dragged young Krishna from the shore into the water, or whether Krishna had himself jumped from the shore and fallen into the clutches of the snake. They could not understand about the situation, and Krishna's cowherd boyfriends, being unconscious, were unable to tell them anything. The cows and calves were crying out for Krishna, and thus the whole situation was overwhelmingly and created was overwhelming and created a state of shock and panic among the residents of Vrindavan. Text number 20. When the young gopis, whose minds were constantly attached to Krishna, the unlimited Supreme Lord, saw that he was now within the grips of the serpent, they remembered his loving friendship, his smiling glances, and his talks with him. Burning with great sorrow, they saw the entire universe as void. Oh, that's now serious. Text 21. Although the elder gopis were feeling just as much distress as she and were pouring forth a flood of sorrowful tears, they had to forcibly hold back Krishna's mother, whose consciousness was totally absorbed in her son. Standing like corpses, with their eyes fixed upon his face, these gopis each took turns recounting the pastimes of the darling of Raja. You see, this is what happens when you're a gopi and Krishna is in danger. You fix your you fix your eyes upon the face of the Lord, and you begin to remember the pastimes of Krishna, the darling of Raja. Text 22. Lord Balarama then saw that Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men, who had dedicated their very lives to Krishna, were beginning to enter the serpent's lake. As the Supreme Personality Godhead, Lord Balarama fully knew Lord Krishna's actual power, and therefore he restrained them. Purport: Srila Sanatana Goswami explains that Lord Balarama checked some of the cowherd men by speaking to them, others by physically holding them, and still others by casting upon them his potent smiling glance. Distraught over the situation, they were prepared to give up their lives for Lord Krishna by entering the serpent's lake. Text 23. The Lord remained for some time within the coils of the serpent, imitating the behavior of an ordinary mortal. But when he understood that the women, children, and other residents of his village of Gokula were in acute distress because of their love for him, their only shelter and goal in life, he immediately rose up from the bonds of the Kaliya serpent. Text 24. His coils, tormented by the expanding body of the Lord, Kaliya released him. In great anger, the serpent then raised its hoods high and stood still, breathing heavily. His nostrils appeared like vessels for cooking poison, and the staring eyes in his face like firebrands. Thus the serpent looked at the Lord. Oh boy, that's scary, very scary. Text 25. Again and again, Kalia licked his lips with his bifurcated tongues as he stared at Krishna with a glance full of terrible, poisonous fire. But Krishna playfully circled around him, just as Garuda would play with a snake. In response, Kalia also moved about, looking for an opportunity to bite the Lord. Oh, horrible, scary. Purport. Lord Krishna moved around the serpent so skillfully that Kalia could find no opportunity to bite him. Thus, the snake was defeated by Sri Krishna's transcendental agility. Text 26. Let's see what time is it. Yeah, time's over. Um, Having severely depleted the serpent's strength with his relentless circling, Sri Krishna, the origin of everything, pushed down Kali's raised shoulders and mounted his broad serpentine heads. Thus, Lord Sri Krishna, the original master of all fine arts, began to dance, his lotus feet deeply reddened by the touch of the numerous jewels upon the serpent's heads. That's a real vision. Purport. Sri Harivamsa states, Shira sa Krishna Jagraha Swa Hasten Van Namya. Krishna grabbed Kalia's head with his hand and forced it to bow down. Most people in this world are quite reluctant to bow down to the Supreme Person, the Absolute Truth. In the contaminated state called material consciousness, we conditioned souls become proud of our insignificant poison and are thus reluctant to bow our heads before the Lord. Yet, just as Lord Krishna forcibly pushed Kali's heads down and thus defeated him, the Supreme Lord's energy in the form of irresistible time kills all conditioned souls and thus forces them to bow down their arrogant heads. We should therefore give up the artificial position of material life and become faithful servants of the Supreme Lord, enthusiastically bowing down at his lotus feet. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Lord Krishna's lotus feet became red like copper because of their contact with the numerous hard jewels upon the heads of Kalyan. Lord Krishna, with those glowing reddish feet, then began to demonstrate his artistic skill by dancing on the unsteady, moving surface of the serpent's hooves. This extraordinary demonstration of dancing skill was meant for the pleasure of the young women of Vrindavan, who at this phase of their relationship with Krishna were seriously falling in love with him. Okay, I think our time is up, and it's a good point to stop and pick it up tomorrow. Okay, so we'll stop there on the text 26, and tomorrow we'll continue on text 27. Are there any questions or comments on what we read today? Okay, our takeaway for today is the following. Our takeaway is when the young gopis, whose minds were constantly attached to Krishna, the unlimited Supreme Lord, saw that he was now within the grips of the serpent. They remembered his loving friendship, his smiling glances, and his talks with him. Burning with great sorrow, they saw the entire universe as void. Oh my God. Although the elder gopis were feeling just as much distress as she and were pouring forth a flood of sorrowful tears, they had to forcibly hold back Mother Yasoda, whose consciousness was totally absorbed in her son. Standing like corpses, with their eyes fixed upon his face, these gopis each took turns recounting the pastimes of the darling of Raja. Yeah, so all they can do is remember Krishna. And that's the only thing that can give them some solace in such a dire situation. Text 22, Lord Balarama then saw that Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men who had dedicated their very lives to Krishna were beginning to enter the serpent's lake. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Balarama fully knew Lord Krishna's actual power, and therefore he restrained them. And it says that, as Sri Sanatana Goswami explained, that Lord Balarama checked some of the cowherd men by speaking to them, others by physically holding them, and still others by casting upon them his potent smiling glance. Distraught over the situation, they were prepared to give up their lives for Lord Krishna by entering the serpent's lake. You don't want to do that. Text 23. The Lord remained for some time within the coils of the serpent, imitating the behavior of an ordinary mortal. But when he understood that the women, children, and other residents of his village of Gokula were in acute distress because of their love for Krishna, their only shelter and goal in life, he immediately rose up from the bonds of the Kaliya serpent. His coils tormented by the expanding body of the Lord, Kaliya released him. In great anger, the serpent then raised its hoods high and stood still, breathing heavily. His nostrils appeared like vessels for cooking poison, and the staring eyes in his face like firebrands. Thus the serpent looked at the Lord. Oh, that's a terrible situation. Again and again, Kaliya licked his lips with his bifurcated tongues as he stared at Krishna with a glance full of terrible poisonous fire. But Krishna playfully circled around him just as Garuda would play with a snake. In response, Kaliya also moved about, looking for an opportunity to bite the Lord. So it says, Lord Krishna moved around the serpent so skillfully that Kaliya could not find no opportunity to bite him. Thus the snake was defeated by Sri Krishna's transcendental agility. Text 26. I'm just rereading this. Having severely depleted the serpent's strength with his relentless circling, Sri Krishna, the origin of everything, pushed down Kaliya's raised shoulders and mounted his broad serpentine head. Thus, Lord Sri Krishna, the original master of all fine arts, began to dance, his lotus feet deeply reddened by the touch of the numerous jewels upon the serpent's head. So he's dancing on the head of the Kaliya serpent. Amen. So that's where we're going to stop. but I'll read the purport also. Shri Harivilas states, Shirasa Krishna Jagraha Swa Hastan Avan Anamya. Krishna grabbed Kalia's head with his hand and forced it to bow down. Most people in this world are quite reluctant to bow down to the Supreme Person, the Absolute Truth. In the contaminated state called material consciousness, we conditioned souls become proud of our insignificant position and are thus reluctant to bow our heads before the Lord. Yet, just as Lord Krishna forcibly pushed Kalia's head down and thus defeated him, the Supreme Lord's energy in the form of irresistible time kills all conditioned souls and thus forces them to bow down their arrogant heads. We should therefore give up the artificial position of the material life and become faithfully servants of the Supreme Lord, enthusiastically bowing down at his lotus feet. Okay, that's very good advice. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Lord Krishna's lotus feet became red like copper because of their contact with the numerous hard jewels upon the heads of Kaliya. Lord Krishna, with those glowing reddish feet, then began to demonstrate his artistic skill by dancing on the unsteady, moving surface of the serpent's hooves. This extraordinary demonstration of dancing skill was meant for the pleasure of the young women of Vrindavan, who at this phase of their relationship with Krishna were seriously falling in love with him. I like that. Seriously falling in love with him. Okay, we'll stop at text 27. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions or comments?
Yes, Maharaj. I have a question.
Yes.
So, with this amazing feat by Lord Krishna, it will come to a point where Kalia has to have some sort of light bulb go in his head that this is not an ordinary, boy, right? Like, I don't know if we got that comes next in the texts, but at some point, Kalia had to realize that this is the Supreme Lord himself, uh, and not just a regular boy, right, Maharaj?
Yeah, well, as we see in the, if we go forward a little bit, the Lord is going to dance on the heads of Kalia and forcing him to bow down with his foot. And the demigods took each of these exhibitions as an opportunity to worship him, the primeval personality of Godhead, with showers of flowers. That's nice. With showers of flowers. So, therefore, it says that King Parikshit, Lord Krishna's wonderful, powerful dancing, trampled and broke all of Kaliya's 1,000 hoods. Then the serpent, profusely vomiting blood from his mouth, finally recognized Sri Krishna to be the eternal personality of Godhead, the supreme master of all moving and non-moving beings, Sri Narayana. Thus, within his mind, Kaliya took shelter of the Lord. See what happens when the supernatural power of devotee exhibits, then everybody surrenders. And it says in the purport, this is at text 30, in chapter 16 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada points out that whereas previously Kaliya was vomiting blood, poison, now his poison was exhausted and he began to vomit blood. Thus, he had been cleansed of vile contamination within his heart that had manifested a serpent's venom. The word samritva, remembering, is very significant here. The wives of Kaliya were actually serious devotees of Lord Krishna, and according to the acharyas, they had often tried to convince their husband to surrender to him. Finally, finding him in unbearable agony, Kaliya remembered his wife's advice and took shelter of the Lord. Srila Viswanatha Chakravarti Thakur explains that Kaliya's archival had traditionally been Garuda, arch rival, sorry. Kaliya's arch rival had traditionally been Garuda. Yeah, Garuda, he kills birds, the carrier of Vishnu. But now Kaliya realized that he was fighting an opponent who was thousands of times stronger than Garuda, and who therefore could only be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus Kaliya took shelter of Lord Krishna. Well, that's what happens when you come in contact with a person of unlimited prowess. And you realize I should take shelter of this person because I'm not going to be able to kill him. He's too much. He has too much power. He's overbearing me. Okay, we'll stop right there. We're stopping at the point that Kaliya took shelter of Lord Krishna after trying to kill the Lord.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Oh,
Here, Krishna is demonstrating one of his 64 arts dancing on Kaliya's head. In the modern world, we have some groups of people that take they take the credit of creating different things. Like, for an example, they take the credit of creating like the stoplight or the shampoo or different things. So from Krishna's 64 arts, is it true that Krishna is actually the creator of everything? He created all of the different things. No one has actually created anything. Krishna created everything through his 64 arts. Is that true?
well, Krishna is the master of those 64 arts. And when he exhibits them, everyone becomes, uh, everyone bows down to him because of his supreme powers. So what do you want to know now?
Are people in the mundane world actually creators of anything, or has Krishna created everything from his 64 arts, and people are trying to say, "Oh, we created this. I'm the creator of this," but really Krishna is the creator of like all the dance moves. He created all the dances. He created everything, but people are mimicking them and taking credit. Like, we have professional dancers that say, "Oh, I created this particular dance," but really the dances came from Krishna, and they're mimicking them, and they believe that they're the creator.
Yes. Yeah, because ultimately, whenever someone manifests an extraordinary uh, act, it's because they have been blessed by Krishna. and therefore they are glorified by that blessing. It's not that they did something independent of Krishna, that Krishna permitted them to do something wonderful. Therefore, when the devotees see this extraordinary prowess or power, they understand that it's the mercy of Krishna. And here it says, Srila Prabhupada points out that whereas previously Kaliya was vomiting poison, now his poison was exhausted, and he began to vomit blood. Thus, he had been cleansed of vile contamination within his heart that had manifested as serpent's venom. In other words, thus he had been cleansed of the vile contamination within his heart that had manifested as serpent's venom. The word smritva, remembering, is very significant here. The wives of Kaliya were actually serious devotees of Lord Krishna. And according to the Acharyas, they had often tried to convince their husband to surrender to him. Finally, finding him in unbearable agony, Kaliya remembered his wife's advice and took shelter of the Lord. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Kaliya's arch rival had traditionally been Garuda, the carrier of Vishnu. But now Kaliya realized that he was fighting an opponent who was thousands of times stronger than Garuda, and who therefore could be only the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, Kaliya took shelter of Lord Krishna. There it is. That is our takeaway for today. Kaliya understood that he could not defeat the form, the serpent form of Krishna. So he gave up and surrendered to the Lord. When Krishna manifests his unlimited power, everybody surrenders to him. It's just like a hurricane or a tsunami or you could say, an earthquake. Everybody surrenders to God, seeing the terrible prowess of the Lord. Then they realize how they are completely dependent on the Lord. They have no other recourse to think that they have any powers. They're completely at the mercy of the Lord. And then one begins to surrender to the Lord. So that's what happens. Let's say you're in an airplane and it starts going down. What do? Well, you start screaming, you start crying, and then you begin to pray. Whereas before that happened, you were talking nonsense with your friends and thinking that soon the plane will land and will go to the go somewhere and eat meat and have a good time. But as soon as you see that the plane is going to crash, immediately people start worshiping Krishna. So therefore, there's no situation in which we are happy or, let's say, peaceful in the material world. The material world is full of misery. And if we think that, oh, I like this, I like that. No, there's nothing in the material world that is likable. The only thing is our relationship to Krishna. That's the only thing that has value. Everything else, oh, this day today is very nice. Oh, I am going to have a happy time in a picnic. This and that. All of this is uh, illusion. The real fact is that there is death at every moment, and therefore we should be serious to be always engaged in Krishna consciousness. But when we forget about the fact that there's death at every moment, we do all kinds of crazy things, thinking that, oh, life is good. I don't have to worry about this or that. In a second, the whole situation can change by the overwhelming power of Krishna. So therefore, the devotees always are praying, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. And by doing that, they're remembering Krishna all the time. And the karmis, they forget Krishna and start doing all kinds of mundane things, thinking that they are happy. But actually, death is always imminent. And there's no such thing as happiness in the material world. That is an illusion. Okay. So basically, it says, but now Kalia realized that he was fighting an opponent who was thousands of times stronger than Garuda and who therefore could be only the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, Kalia took shelter of Lord Krishna. That's the whole point. When there's a tsunami or there's an earthquake, and Krishna's power is immediately becomes present, people start surrendering to the Lord and praying to the Lord. They realize that there's a supreme power and a supreme personality of Godhead behind that power. And whatever they think they're capable of doing, or the power that they have becomes insignificant, and they're forced to surrender to the Lord. That's why it says that, but now Kalia realized that he was fighting an opponent who was thousands of times stronger than Garuda, and who therefore could be only the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, Kalia took shelter of Lord Krishna. Well,
Yes, Maharaj.
every one of us is going to have a experience in which we realize the unfeathered and unimaginable power of the Lord, and we will completely surrender in such a situation to the mercy of the Lord. Hare Krishna. But we shouldn't wait to have a situation like that. We should surrender all the time to the Lord and follow the rules and regulations of the Lord and never forget how precarious our position is in the material world. If we say, oh, everything is wonderful, I'm happy, and everything's going nicely, all that is illusory. At any moment, the situation can change and we can be overwhelmed by the conditions of the material nature. So we should never feel that everything is okay and I can engage in sense gratification. No. Immediately, we should always take up our remembrance of Krishna and not be fooled by periods where there seems to be mundane happiness. That mundane happiness fools us to think that, oh, everything is okay and nothing bad is going to happen. No, that's not a fact. The only thing that's good is surrendering to Krishna and engaging in his devotional service. Then we are protected by the Lord. But forgetting the Lord and thinking that everything is okay, that's a sign of ignorance. Okay, of course, the Srila Prabhupada ki jai.